Hello and welcome to this edition of Executive Sessions. I'm your host, John Stewart, founding and managing partner of MiddleGround Capital. Join us on Executive Sessions where we talk about everything industrial manufacturing based. And today I am pleased to have with me a couple of guests to talk about how to stay plugged in on the shop floor. We always get busy in our day-to-day roles and take on additional tasks and responsibilities as we move up inside the organization. And even though we may have started our careers on the shop floor, as we take on more responsibility, more things will pull us away from the shop floor. And so it's important to have methods and processes and systems to stay connected with the shop floor, because as all of us in industrial manufacturing know that the most important jobs are the ones that are closest to our customers. And so we want to make sure that we stay plugged in. So I think this is going to be a great topic for us to jump in today. First, I'd like to introduce David Dressman and have David tell us a little bit about himself. And then our other guest, Scot Duncan. Anybody that knows anything about me or MiddleGround Capital, Scot and I have been partners for over 30 years in industrial manufacturing, and we've seen just about everything. But for probably about half of that, we've known David and David's team at Banner. And so, David, why don't you tell us a little bit of the background about you?
I represent Banner Management Consulting. I'm a founding partner there. We get plugged into mostly PE companies around, again, addressing value creation plans, creating them, implementing them, and driving change. Native to Kentucky, been here my whole life, but visiting 52 countries. Manufacturing is manufacturing. It's just how you address it and how you look at it. So my experience is one that I'm going to bring from, I think, what works and what works well that we've seen at MiddleGround, and what works well in organizations that don't do so well.
Scot, for those that may have just jumped in, this is their first episode. Why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my career started at Toyota, obviously similar to yours. I started there as an engineer in the assembly department. I worked in several different positions there as an engineer, process engineer, and then I worked for maintenance for a while, so maintenance engineer. Worked on the new model group, and then was promoted to engineering supervisor and then production supervisor, and then obviously worked with you at a prior private equity firm where I was in the operations team. Started as a vice president in that team and then moved my way up to the director. So basically my whole career has been industrial engineering, industrial supervision.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people always ask us, why do you do what you do? And I think most of the people that enjoy industrial manufacturing would say for the same reason, is that they enjoy it. There's a lot of jobs that you have where you don't actually create anything. Manufacturing, you're actually creating something. So you're using, your hands, you're using machinery, you're using your processes to actually create something. You're taking some component, some raw material that may sometimes not even look anything like what the final product is going to look like. And then you're able to transform that through that process into something that is tangible that somebody can go and use for a different purpose. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about industrial manufacturing. And so we're going to jump right in here. And, one of the reasons, we talk about, staying plugged in on the shop floor is that it's just important for everyone in the organization to know what happens in the operations. I can't tell you how many times we will go to visit a new company, or when we purchase a company, or even go to one of our companies that we own, or go back to the time at Toyota, where you go into a manufacturing area and the people at the top of the organization have no idea what's going on the shop floor.
Yeah, we've seen that multiple times. I've seen you, and I have done the same thing, uncover things that were going on the shop floor that were like either really easy fixes that people didn't get the support for, and you just think to yourself, how did they put up with this condition for so long? Months and months, and even sometimes, and I can speak to one specific example later, where the management team was reporting to us for months and months about their equipment that wasn't working correctly. And, I specifically remember the call where they said, there's no way that we can fix it. There's just nothing that can be done to fix this problem. And in that particular instance, I remember you saying, well, then Scott and I'll be there on Monday, and we'll go take a look ourselves if you guys think that there's no fix. That's one. So anyway, I think it's great, in order to be able to give people support for something that really has been bothering them. I mean, you think about these people that are on a process for 8 or 10 hours a day. They're struggling for some reason. They don't really know necessarily the solution, but they most of the time know what the problem is, and they know what they're experiencing. So that's interesting to always bring those sorts of things to light. But we've also uncovered things that were going on sort of systematically across an organization that were just like not necessarily a specific process, but when you start to talk to people, you might hear that the shop floor, there's nobody that ever comes to the shop floor to support, or that maybe even supervisors are favoring certain people and not even applying the human capital and human resource sort of rules to everybody. And it's really just it's amazing what you can uncover when you go and you start to talk to people on the shop floor, what they'll tell you. They really want to tell you things. They really want support, and I find out a lot more on those walks and those conversations than I do meeting with the management team in a boardroom.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is when we walk into these organizations, one of the first things we do when we talk to the management team is ask them their level of connectedness to the floor. They'll tell you they're plugged in, we see it, we're doing great, and then they'll start to spout out some metrics. They'll start to spout out how well they're doing the things they're working on, and then you ask, can you show me? Can you tell me why this area is not performing? Mm-hmm. Take me out there and show me. What they tell you and what you see is different. Mm-hmm. I almost guarantee it every single time. So that's the real beauty in assessing leadership versus what's actually happening on the floor. And if we talk about, respect and humility and leadership toward people, because we've hired people to perform a job for us. And generally speaking, people want to do a good job, mm-hmm. right? And you bring them in, and if you don't understand the processes, you don't understand the fight that they may be faced with. And so if we bring them in and we don't set them up for failure, I define that as disrespect.
Yeah, I think, you don't think about, but respect is, you show respect by what you respect in the organization by the time that you put towards it. If you're the CEO of a company and you've not ever been to your facilities, then, what message does that send? It's funny, I think that irregardless of whether it's an operation that's having problems, like I think every operation has their own problems, but it could be a well-performing organization. It's still important for the leadership to be seen out on the shop floor. And I remember one of the things that we used to do at Toyota is at the beginning of the day, when you're a supervisor, one of the things that they teach you is just to be aware of the situation, making sure that when you're starting up an operation that you're visibly going and walking around. And when I got promoted to, a team leader where I had 5 people to report it to me, you were talking about, just checking 5 things. And then as you progressively move up through the organization, then you're walking around, to larger and larger areas, and you're spending more of your time walking around and, kind of the Japanese philosophy of Genchi Genbutsu, which is managed by, walking around. And it's not just walking around. We hired a guy from General Motors I'll never forget, and they didn't understand the details of the training. They hadn't been through it, and someone talked to him about managed by walking around. He decided he thought it'd be cool one day in the summer to walk around with popsicles and hand out popsicles to people. Well, they're making a car. Like, how are they supposed to eat a popsicle while they're on the line, like running a process? And he was just, he thought walking around just meant going around, walking around, talking to people and handing out popsicles, but it's hard to eat a popsicle when you're working on the production line trying to build a car, at least at Toyota. You might be able to do that some other places, maybe General Motors where it came from. But, so we're talking about why staying plugged in matters. So let's start it off, and I'll ask a question, give each of you an opportunity to respond, and you can build off of one another, kind of however you want to take it, and be kind of casual with it. But we'll start with David. David, what are some mistakes that you've seen leaders make inside of companies when it comes to staying plugged in?
Yeah, a couple things there, John. Up to build off what you said, just walking the shop floor without aim is pretty much useless, and it signals to the employees that you're more focused about walking around than actually the needs of the processors or the people themselves. So going without purpose, so having no clarity for the whole reason you're there is a major problem. And the ability to direct action. The whole purpose of leadership is to drive change and action on the shop floor, at least in the guise of manufacturing at this level. And so if you're not doing that, you're not signaling that you're a strong enough organization to support change. So that's a mistake, not having clarity and expectation and not focusing on real action. A couple other things, that I think about is as it relates to people and people's needs. If you're not talking to the people, you're not understanding their needs. And if we're an organization that manages by data, which I see this a lot, the data suggests that I need to go work in product area XYZ, and you launch a whole litany of things on these folks, but you never talk to these folks, right? We didn't really understand what's happening because you've got qualitative data and quantitative data. And this is where you can plug and bridge those two together. So if you're only looking at one set of data, hey, someone told me this, and then you're launching efforts without the data or vice versa, that's a huge, huge mistake.
A couple things that come to mind for me when you go out, particularly if you're like standing at a process or something, it may be a process that has a problem or doesn't have a problem, but you can imagine an operator that's been there for years and years. They're doing the same job. All of a sudden, they look around. There's 4 people around them, and they're like, "What in the world are these people doing?" So I think it is important to, when you're specifically looking at a process or even talking to a team member, is to make them understand the reason why you're there, so that they are comfortable. You can imagine the anxiety that all of a sudden 4 people watching you do a process might create, and they're like, "Oh my God, what are they doing here?" But if you let them know that you're there to look at that particular process, maybe you thought that they had problems with the equipment, or you heard that there was some issues there, to let them know that you're there to help to understand what that issue is.
Right.
I think that's important. Just that is important, and that's respectful to people. I think most operators would love that, and love that after you tell them that that's what you're there for. A lot of times by the time you go there and look at a problem, or go there and talk to a person, you have an idea of what you think the issue is. And you really have to fight that, because you may have heard about this problem for, days even. And it's like, well, yeah, they're having a problem because of this or because of that. And that might not be right. More often than not, it's probably not right. But you've had that in your mind the whole time that you've heard about this, is that they're having a problem for this reason, and you go out there and, if you don't really get involved and try to understand the situation, you could easily say, yeah, it looks like that's the problem, and then you walk away, and you might fix something, but it's not the problem for the operator. And so you really got to be open-minded to what the real condition is. You got to learn it from the operator, feel it and touch it. It's more than just standing back and looking and making some assumptions and making some assessment. The more you can get in and do the process and those sorts of things, the more that the person will feel respected and feel like you're really trying to find out what the problem is. It doesn't matter what the problem is. But you have to know what the problem is to fix it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I've seen it a lot, and I've seen it, in my own career. People assume that they know what the problem is, and sometimes that comes from people that report to them telling them what it is without them going and seeing it for themselves. And so that's one of the things that I liked about our processes at Toyota, and that's what I like about it in manufacturing in general. Is, you can go and see the problem. You can go right to the floor and see the problem. And it's so funny to me how people that work in manufacturing, they're just not comfortable going out to the floor. And, they're real hesitant to want to talk to the people on the floor because they're afraid they're going to tell them about problems. I mean, I hear people say that all the time. And I actually do the opposite. So when I go, and Scott knows this, when I go into a factory, I actually go to the people that are actually the people that are the ones that are going to tell you all the problems. And so I seek those people out because, they're going to tell you what all the problems are. They're going to tell you what's going on. They're going to tell you, whatever the situation is. And, internally that their supervisors may not like them, because they think of these people are just stirring stirring up things and causing trouble. But the way I look at it is, especially if I'm walking in there and, especially now in my role as kind of chairman of the board and, majority owner of the company, if I'm walking in there and the person got the balls enough to say, hey, to me that there's a problem, then they really care about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And there legitimately is a problem that they think that somebody should be able to fix.
Absolutely.
One mistake I think people make is they cater to people that are going to tell them what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And I actually like to do the opposite. I like to put myself in situations where people are going to tell me the truth, even if it's not what they think I want to hear. Mm-hmm. And what those people, they may think that, hey, I just told the chairman of the board, I just told him off or whatever. No, you didn't. You just gave me a bunch of information about the people that are managing that business, and then I'm going to hold them accountable based on those things that were told to me. But I think that's a big mistake that people make is they assume things. And Scott, you brought up an example of that. When we first started the portfolio here, mm-hmm. and we were doing the Friday update calls. I know the situation you're talking about. Why don't you tell that story?
Yeah, sure. So we had a particular type of equipment at one of our facilities in one of the early companies that we acquired, and we had them start to report on their equipment downtime because they didn't report that at all. So they send us a daily email, and we just had them start to add that. And what we were seeing first couple of days that they added that is that this type of piece of equipment was down 3 or 4 hours a day. And for us, at our history at Toyota and assembly, anything more than 5 minutes is a major breakdown. It's a major problem, and you got to end up reporting it up through the organization. So 3 or 4 hours is way more than 5 minutes. So that's when we started asking the COO who was on the call, the CEO on the call, what was being done about it. And they had history of that problem. It wasn't like new to them, but their answer was basically, we've tried everything we could do. We've had this company come in, we've had this company come in, we tried to do this with the material, and it was never fixed. And so they ended up saying, literally, there's nothing we can do about it.
We've tried everything. That's what they said. We've tried everything.
I can remember that being said, and that I knew that perked you up. I was not looking at you at the time, but I could have predicted what your demeanor was at the moment. And so, yeah, that's when you said, well, we'll be there Monday, and we'll figure it out together. We'll go to the shop floor. You didn't say, we'll come in and we know more than you or anything like that. I think you even asked, have you talked to the operators about it? And they were like, yeah, we talked to them. No, blah, blah. And so we went. You made sure that they were with us. They had to fly into this location. It was not the location where they were normally on a Monday morning. So they came with us. We went to the shop floor, and you walked up to the operator on this piece of equipment, and it wasn't like he had to be managing it 100% at the time. And you asked a question about what was going on, and he said, well, this tooling, it causes this long sliver off of what the tooling should be cutting, and it gets jammed up in there, and then we don't have a good way to get it out. And you said, well, is there any way that, how to fix that? He said, yeah, there's tools, there's new tools. We've already got a quote. We asked our management team to buy these new tools, they cost a little more than the regular tools, so they said we couldn't do it. And I remember you turned around to the CEO and COO and called them over and said, this guy has an idea about new tooling. He says it costs a little more, but surely it's not worth 3 hours or 4 hours of downtime a day.
It was like $5,000.
It was not that much.
It was not that much.
And actually, we never heard about that problem ever again, if I remember correctly.
Oh, well, they never told us that they tried everything in the world again either.
No, they did not. But it was amazing how quick that operator knew the problem and knew that there was a solution. He had heard of the solution. He was just told that whoever they is, said
they wouldn't let us have it. He said, so what was funny is, remember, they tried to give us a presentation.
Yeah.
We were like, no. And we just stopped them. And then I just walk up to the operator, and we were just watching for a few minutes. And then I just asked him a question. And then he's like, yeah, they won't buy us the right tool. And I'm like, well, I'm the they. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like,
You're like, who's they? They is us.
and I think that when they told us they tried everything, they thought their team had tried everything.
I agree. I don't think they were just lying to
No,
us.
no, I
agree
don't
with
think
you
so at
completely.
all.
They just assumed that what they heard was right.
Yeah, they assumed that they had tried everything, and what they didn't know that there was a $5,000 tool that would fix the problem and address it. And of course, if the CEO or the COO knew that that's all it needed, they would have already fixed it. But they just listened to what somebody else told them, what somebody else said. But in that instance, one of the things that was a problem was it had become the norm for things to be down for hours. Yep. I remember when we set the first KPI up, I think it was like they had to report every downtime over 6 hours or something like that. It was something crazy.
It was a high bar. One thing I want to say earlier, your question earlier about the people that you seek out, and I've seen you seek those people out, and they are generally the ones that can be more loud about their issues. But one thing I learned too about those people after watching and seeing it and then doing it myself is that those people are informal leaders on the shop floor too. Yes. And if you don't fix their problems and you don't even act like you support those people, well then what they're going to do is talk to everybody else about how much their problem is and how much they're not getting support. But then if you help fix their problems, it could change that informal leadership message to, hey, these guys, they came down, they actually tried to understand what I was doing and fix it, and it's different. And they can be informal leaders in a good way or a bad way. Those informal leaders are important on the shop floor and can really help set the tone.
It's that process of going to the point of where the execution is happening inside the organization, whatever the product is or the process is that's going on, and observing like firsthand for yourself. And I think that's another part of it, that concept of Genshi Genbutsu, that concept isn't managed by having other people wander around.
Right.
It's you managing by going out on the shop floor and you going out and seeing those items. And I remember when I was being trained at Toyota, and this was some years after I'd been there. I'd probably been there 10 years or so at this point. And one of my Japanese trainers was training me in the facility, and he wanted me to observe this certain part of the area of the production line, and I did that. I was probably had spent 6 or 8 hours on the production line, and he starts asking me questions, and I remember he's like, what kind of tool were they using on process such and such? And I'm thinking, what? There's like 500 people out here, how am I supposed to remember like all the tools? And he goes, well, you failed, and I was like, okay. And so, then the next time I went out, I was studying the tools and I was studying the torque and, like with the torque of every fastener on the car that they were. And Scott probably remember, I used to know all of it. I used to have them all memorized and know it. But it wasn't about knowing the torque and the tool that was the important thing. It was paying attention to those little details. But you have to make the time. You have to like put a schedule in place, and you got to have a process that allows you to go and do that. And as I got promoted up through the organization, what I'd always do is the problems from the day before, or from as we'd come in for first shift, the stuff that happened on night shift, the first thing I would go do is I would go and observe where they had a problem from the previous night, especially if there was countermeasures that were supposed to be put in place or whatever, additional resources or temporary process or whatever. I would always go to that place first thing just to make sure that this problem is contained now from the previous shift, and make sure that that's not going to continue to be a problem. But just build that into your process so that you're going out and taking the time to do that. And look, that could be a CEO. That could be like, okay, I'm going to go to the plant that has the lowest gross margin, each month. And I'm going to go to the process that has the most scrap or the most downtime or whatever. There's some process that you can build that in, to make that work. So now I'm going to just change that question up. What are some really good best practices that you've seen some management teams do, in the portfolio companies? And this time I'll let you lead it off, Scott.
Yeah. So we had. I was working at a company, and we don't own it anymore. But I was there a lot. There was a lot of talk about the fact that there wasn't a lot of support to the shop floor. The engineers, the quality people, they never came to the shop floor. We started a Gemba walk every 2 hours. Right after startup, we met at the board, talked about the things that happened last night, and we had a regular route, and we would go on that regular route, which was where the main processes were, and quality was with us. Safety was with us. The process engineers were with us. The maintenance people were with us. So we had a group of people that went, 4 times a day throughout that shop. Now you can't always do that. That was after a particular change, so there was, a lot of variation going on at that time. But it was extremely important because it was every 2 hours, and everybody had to be there. The plant manager, if somebody wasn't there, would not start unless the person was there or the group was represented by somebody. And then, we would go around and find out, 1 or 2 a day that we would help fix. And we got to the point where the team leader of that team had to report to us what those problems were. So sometimes, after a while, it got to the point where the team leader was like, we're doing good. We're hitting our targets. I've went around and talked to everybody on the process, and seems like everything's going good, so we kind of would go past that. You don't have to dig in deep every single time, but it sure showed a lot of support for the people, because we had a group of 10 basically, including the private equity owner group, every 2 hours. That's a lot of support, and it took a lot of time, but it was worth it.
I think building on that, Scott, it's really important to have standards in place, right? Because part of the Gemba walk is to determine when there are deviations to standard. Right, and those are the things that you want to address. And so when you think about what needs to happen, part of your role as a leader is to connect who that can make change with the what that needs to be changed. And so if you struggle to identify deviation to standard, safety, productivity, quality, cost, how can you clearly call out what we need to address? When I think about observation, you've got observation of operator, you've got observation of process, but can you separate those out? Are you good enough to say the person isn't following the process, or is the process out of standard? Because those are very different mitigation standards, right? And so the more adept your team is at problem solving and can delineate those issues, the faster and more robust the problem solving process becomes. So once you're at a standard, right, you can, as a coach doing one of these Gemba walks, people tend to, we need more people, we need more capital. We need to boil the ocean here, right? Mm-hmm. Can you narrow their focus down, right? Can you say, hey, what are the couple things that you can work on, and we can talk about it tomorrow, right? Let's not talk about the 50 things. What can you do tomorrow? Let's talk about that. We'll review it tomorrow. Yeah. So really narrowing the focus down as an effective leader in a Gemba walk can really not only show coaching on problem solving, but show how we can get to somewhere faster, right? Iterative change is what we're after.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point, David. It's anybody can bring up problems that somebody else needs to solve.
Yes. Right?
And so it's talking about what can we do inside of our control to control the problem. And so, in the assembly plant, you're getting the raw materials from other manufacturing facilities, and you're just assembling it all together. And if they don't make it correctly, then when you get it, you can't assemble it correctly. But it's still got to be correct when it goes out the door for the customer. They don't care if the vendor didn't make it right.
They do not.
All right, so you gotta make it right. And so, people be like, this part's screwed up. It's somebody else's responsibility. Well, no, it's not, because we still got to get these cars out the door. So now, do we need to put an extra person here? Do we need to rework the products, the parts before they go on the car? Do we need to rework them after they go on the car? Do we need to set up a special check? What is it that we need to do to make sure first the customer is not getting the problem?
Yes.
And this is in our control. Right. And then once we get that under control, now we can go back and work on the problem with the vendor, if there's a vendor problem. But everybody wants to point out problems that somebody else needs to solve. And that's why, to Scott's point, you put all those people in the meeting together. And then that way people can't point fingers if somebody's not in the meeting. If the purchasing guys are responsible and there's part shortages, okay, well, they need to be there, and they need to be talking about what the timeline is to resolve those part shortages, with the production people. But again, that walking around the shop floor, the other thing that you're doing is you're checking for alignment. right? As the whatever your role of leadership is in your span of control, you're checking for alignment.
Great point, John. It's an alignment exercise. This is where the strategy meets the tactical response, right? So this is where the orchestration is done together. And so if you've got a clear leader that's clear in their expectation, employees, managers, team leaders, they know what you're measuring. They're going to come with what you're expecting to see.
Now as we're kind of, last kind of question I think we have time for is, technology is advancing. I think AI is a fantastic tool. There's a lot of tools that, the shop floor can use or managers can use in general to help them with doing, shop floor observations. How is technology changing this, David, from your perspective, and how does it help and how does it hamper, going to the shop floor and firsthand observation?
Yeah, I mean it's both good and bad. It should seek to complement, right? But it shouldn't seek to completely replace. And I think that's sort of the detriment I've seen in a lot of places. We want to manage afar because we've got visual dashboards, or if we've got trending over time, and we assume again, back to the very beginning of this conversation, we assume we know what the problem is, right? Mm-hmm. You can have real live data mining tell you that we've got microstops, but you don't know what the microstop is until you go and see. Are we not feeding the machine? Is the machine not indexing correctly? We don't know until we go. So, there is, especially now I will say, if you layer AI on top of some of these things, now you can get some predictive modeling. That's sort of an emerging space. And there's a lot of promise there. But again, it's not a complete replacement. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, we're drowning in information, but starved for wisdom. And so that wisdom is born out of the shop floor, right? I mean, you can watch YouTube videos all you want, but that doesn't know how to solve a problem. And so that wisdom comes from being in the Gemba. So now if you've got robust data and you've got the wisdom of actually understanding, separating people from process like we talked about before, do you really understand what waste is? Do you really understand when somebody's asking you for more people, what they're really saying? Can you go and see that actually they're over-processing? They don't need more people. The problem is they have too many people, right? You have to be able to delineate that. So data is a good thing, but in itself, if we only rely on quantitative data, we're going to hurt ourselves. We got to layer it with a qualitative realization of what the Gemba brings you.
Like I've said, there's other conversations to be had and other things to be learned from being physically out on the shop floor. Your physical presence matters to people. At some point in leadership, you have to understand that just being there is important. And asking open-ended questions about things that you may not even be anticipating what the answer is. I mean, you can't get that from data, from a dashboard. If you talk to somebody and you say, hey, how are things going? After you talk about their particular problem, how are things going generally? Everything all right with you? I mean, maybe it might be that somebody's struggling with some issue that doesn't have to do with that process or that piece of equipment or that tool. Those sorts of conversations you can never get from a dashboard or data or anywhere. Just sometimes, obviously one of the greatest assets and one of the best things about working in manufacturing is people. Mm-hmm. Also, one of the biggest variables in manufacturing is people. And at the end of the day, people are people, and sometimes they'll bring up other issues. They might be having a problem with the team leader on their other shift, and you would probably never know that from the data that you get. They may be having a problem with their supervisor. They may be having a problem at home, and it may have nothing to do with the job. And they just, might need a different kind of, solution or countermeasure if there is one of those things. At the end of the day, everybody that's out there wants to do a good job. I do agree with that. 99.9% of the people on the shop floor want to do a good job. And, they have issues too.
Yeah, on the technology side, I would tell you that the KPIs or the data should tell you where to go. Mm-hmm. And then you should rely on that firsthand observation to determine, what is going on. And look, I have a lot of people on my team that complain about having to put together all of this data and this information, and why do we have to do this? And, oh, this is a lot. We got to do a lot. Oh, this is too much, And, the alternative is to go to the plants themselves and gather it all individually, But when you have to take all of the information, you have to do all the work, and you have to put it all together. You have to analyze it yourself. You have to go to the to the the point of the problem itself and observe, and you have to do all that, then you end up knowing the process better. And you end up kind of being able to master that. So we're almost out of time here. Just closing thoughts from each of you, maybe just a quick point. What advice would you give to people, to leaders that want to connect better with the shop floor? What would just be like one thing that you could give them that they could do that's simple, that they can incorporate into their daily routine that will help them connect with the shop floor? Scott?
I would say, not stealing from your answer earlier, is basically just to make sure that they set aside the time to do it and just go do it. I would say start small and fix a problem or two, get the right people around you. But, set aside the time. Make that time as important as the staff meeting that's on your schedule or the board meeting that's on your schedule, and keep it sacred.
Yeah. I would say follow through, right? If you're going to do all this work and you don't follow through, people are going to quickly realize that if you don't take it serious, I don't have to take it serious, right? So really driving the execution and accountability piece of this is just as important as being out there. So take it serious, and just be humble while you're out there.
Yeah, one of the things that's always helped me in my career is, and I go back to something that I did as an hourly supervisor. But one of the first things is having a physical, today we work in this digital world, and I know there's digital replacements for all this, but a physical checklist of the things that you need to do on a daily basis that are important to you. And to make sure that you have on that list of things that are important for you, on the top of that list is that, going and just observing where there was, an issue, the day before, or from the past. Maybe there's one bolt on the car that determines whether you have steering or not steering, and everybody at Toyota knows what I'm talking about. I'm not going to call out, but it's that way on every vehicle. There's one bolt, and there's no redundancy for it. So, like, if that fails, like, you can't steer the car. And if the person doesn't properly install that, like, you're not going to be able to steer the car. Like, you're going to have a problem. And, and I can't tell you how many times we'd have a problem with that one bolt. It got to where everybody knew that one. And so, if you, when you had that area of your responsibility, that was one thing I was checking every day. I was making sure that I went to that process, made sure everything was running normal, that they were doing all the proper backup procedures, they were recording all the data, like all the information, because there was that one thing that you could do. You could build that whole car and everything be perfect, but you mess up that one bolt and you could literally cause, like a catastrophic event, for somebody. And so, find out what are those things that are what's that one bolt example in your daily life, in your daily responsibility? What's that one thing that if you it's a critical issue that's going to cause, failure, to a customer or in your process that you just can't achieve, and make sure that's on the top of your checklist, and make sure that you're giving yourself time to, for you to make sure that one thing is completed, to give you peace of mind, because, at the end of the day, our day can be filled with many things, but you have to prioritize what you put in your time. And thank you for prioritizing, taking the time to listen to us, and hopefully that you're finding these podcasts helpful. And if you have ideas or topics that you'd like us to cover, you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to try to incorporate all of those. Thanks to my guests today, and thank you.